Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. In today's show, I'm delighted to be joined by Stacy Juba. Stacy is a successful author, having published 10 books, as well as an award-winning journalist, a freelance editor, and an online writing instructor. Hello and welcome to the show, Stacy.
Hi, thank you. It's fantastic to be here.
Thank you ever so much for coming on. So how are things in America?
Well, a bit crazy right now. Pandemic, election.
And how's it been with the COVID situation?
I'm in Massachusetts, so it's been hasn't been too bad here lately. Where kids are doing hybrid school, going a couple of days a week, and then they're at home the other days. So
yeah,
it's definitely been a big change.
Yes, it's been a very difficult year for everybody, hasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
So before we talk about your career as an author, Stacy, and obviously what you do as a writing instructor, can you just tell us a little bit about you and sort of how you got to where you are, please?
I've always loved to read and write. I started writing when I was in third grade and never stopped. I wrote my first book in high school and started submitting short stories to magazines in high school. I became a newspaper reporter after graduating college. Did some freelance writing for parenting magazines and different health publications. The whole time I was writing on the side. And then eventually I also branched out into editing and teaching online courses for writers.
Oh, I see. So that's how you got going. So you've always liked writing ever since you were at school, and it's just carried on. Yes.
Yeah. I was very shy and introverted growing up. So I think writing was a way to help me express myself. And I had a fifth grade teacher in particular who, once he noticed, because we did a lot of creative writing in his class. So once he noticed that I seemed to have a talent for writing, he really encouraged it and made a big deal out of it. So I think that helped me to increase my confidence and to keep going with it.
Yeah, and when what was the point when you decided to become a sort of full-time author?
So I had my first book published when I was 18 years old, and that was after I won a competition for teenage writers, and the winner got published with Avon Books, their young adult imprint at the time, Avon Flair. But I still continued writing. That book did well and everything, but again, I was only 18. I was just starting college, so I kept writing. Still had a lot to learn. Over the years, had a lot of rejection. Worked with agents, and then when I first decided to really get, I guess, even more serious about it in the sense of launching a website and just really branding myself as an author, is when I got a contract for my second book 25 years ago today, a mystery novel. I sold that to a small mystery publisher, and that's when that was about 2010, 2011, and that's when I launched my website and started really delving into book promotion, and I sold my second book through them. And then around that time is when Kindle and Nook was just really taking off. So then I had my ebook rights. So then I started branching into indie publishing. And it's just been kind of going strong ever since.
So you are self-publishing?
Right now I'm self-publishing, yes.
Yeah. And obviously the boom in ebooks, Kobos and Kindles, I would suggest has really helped things.
Yes. Yeah. And then also I had the audiobook rights to my book. So I work with ACX, which is through Amazon, their audiobook arm. So I have most of my books on Audible also. So that was a fun experience. I get to work directly with the narrators, choose my narrators. Yeah. So it's really amazing all the opportunities there are for indie authors today, much different compared to when I was first starting out in the early 90s.
Yes. I mean, just so the listeners are aware of the sorts of books you do, what type of books do you do? And can you just tell us a bit about your books, please?
I've written in some different genres. My first book was a young adult hockey novel called Face Off, and that was one published when I was 18. And then I wrote a sequel to it 25 years later. I actually had a draft of it.
25 years later?
Yes, yeah, because the first book was still selling really strong, and the sequels had gotten rejected by that publishing company because there'd been a lot of turnover with editors and everything. And so it had just been in my drawer for years, but it was sort of always on my bucket list that I wanted to revisit it, especially since I was getting requests from it. I was getting emails from mothers and grandmothers whose kids really enjoyed the first book and they wanted to know if there's a sequel. So I released the sequel. I totally rewrote it and then released the sequel about a year ago. So those are is
that a sort of young adult type of book?
So those are young adult sports fiction. Then I have a couple of mysteries. They're kind of a blend of cozy mystery and romantic suspense. The two standalone mystery novels. I have a young adult paranormal thriller called Dark Before Dawn, a children's picture book about the U.S. flag code and flag etiquette that I actually collaborated with my father. He did the illustrations. And then most recently I've been focusing on a totally different genre for me, my Storybook Valley chick lit romantic comedy novels. It's a blend of chick lit and humor and sweet, clean romance set at a fairy tale theme park.
Yeah. So, So you like bringing in humor?
Yes. Yeah. When I first started out, my earlier books are more serious, maybe with a little bit of humor here and there, but I would definitely define them as more serious. So branching out into chick lit was an unexpected kind of twist in my career. I've been reading a lot of chick lit and it made me laugh out loud. And I think that's what inspired me to.
So for those unfamiliar with chick lit, I'm assuming chick literature.
Yes.
Teenage girls?
No, women. So adult fiction. It's sort of, most of them are humorous. An author that I really like is Sophie Kinsella. She's a UK-based author. The Confessions of a Shopaholic series, or like Bridget Jones' Diary. So it's sort of there could be a romance in it, but it's more about their journey, the female character's journey, and it's just with a lot of humor. Yeah.
Oh, so it sounds interesting. Sort of thing that perhaps TV or film might be interested in.
Yes, that is my dream, yeah.
And you mentioned about your journalism career and you won an award. Can you just tell us a bit about your award?
I won several awards over the years. I did journalism probably about 4 years, probably working at a newspaper. And then I did some freelance writing for parenting magazines. So I won some New England Press Association awards for different articles. One was for a package of a bunch of different articles for on school bus safety for a regional parenting magazine. So I did all kinds of, just basically took it from all different angles on school bus safety, whether there should be seatbelts and the pros and cons of that, just all kinds of things. So I won an award for that. I won a Sword of Hope Media Award for writing an article about cancer, melanoma. And then I won several awards from different parenting organizations, like Parenting Publications of America, for the freelance articles I was doing for the parenting magazine.
Yes. Oh, right. So quite a wide variety of subject matter.
Yeah, I always, when I was a newspaper reporter, I covered everything from town meetings to police to feature stories, but I've always had a special interest in health and wellness. So a lot of my articles that I was recognized for were relating to health and wellness topics.
Yeah. Yeah. And latterly, you've got, I believe latterly you've got into the book editing program, which you call, is it the Blueprint program?
Yeah. So that's an online course that I launched this year. And it was inspired because I'd been doing freelance developmental editing for about 5 or 6 years. And I noticed that most of the manuscripts that were submitted to me were just really first drafts, even though the authors might have been working on it a long time and trying to rewrite to the best of their ability. They what it amounted to was like a first draft, and they would need ideally to send the rewrite back for another round of editing, and some of them would need 5, 6, 7 rounds of editing
Really?
if they were beginners. And really, most writers can't afford that because they're doing it on the side. It's a passion,
Yes.
and they have other job and responsibilities. So I created the book editing blueprint course as a stepping stone to hiring an editor, where I boiled it down to 10 modules of all the most common mistakes that I see in manuscript after manuscript, and try to empower the writers to learn to pick up on some of these things themselves so that they'll know how to approach their rewrite, and they can do these earlier rounds of editing themselves. And then when they are ultimately ready to hire an editor, it'll be for a much stronger draft, so they can streamline the process and cut down on their expenses, and hopefully maybe just need a couple rounds of editing once they get more and more.
I think for those of us who aren't authors, to us probably for the listeners, a lot of people would think that editing is sort of making sure the commas are in the right place and the full stops, but it's a lot more than that, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's a misconception that a lot of beginner writers have also. So it's often a lot of times they'll submit a manuscript to an editor, and there's different kinds of editors, but the first editor that you always want to start with is a developmental editor who looks at the big picture, and that's what I do. But the misconception is, even from beginner writers, is that they're just going to get a little bit of feedback here and there to flesh things out or fix their commas, and it's often a huge learning curve and a huge eye opener for them when they realize how much rewriting needs to be done. Like, do they have a character arc for their protagonist? Is there enough plot points and conflict? A lot of beginner authors tend to have sagging middles where there's just not enough conflict. It's more like episodic rather than building toward a climax. And even just the actual approach to writing it, a lot of beginner writers have trouble with point of view, and they kind of write it from a more omniscient style where they're not really getting into their narrator's heads, so that it's hard for their readers to warm up to the character, get to know the character, and know their motivations. And so something like that, if they're not getting into their character's head enough, or if the main character just isn't developed enough, that's something that could influence, every single page of the book, if they're telling, not showing. So it's often a shock to them when they get back. I tend to write 8-page single-space editorial letters filled with all my suggestions and feedback, and it can come as a shock once they realize how much work there is to do structurally when they were expecting, just little things.
Yeah, I guess it must, for a lot of writers, it must mean that they sort of, I wouldn't say they give up, but they think twice about the amount of work they've got to do.
And I'd say most of them really want to improve. So once they've spent that money on it initially, that means they're pretty serious about it. But what I find is when they take my class, or if I have a writer as a client who has a lot of work ahead of them, I try to just really encourage them, because even though they really want to finish and rewrite it and keep going with it, sometimes it can just seem like this monumental task, and they think maybe I'm not cut out for this. And I think it's important for them to realize that this is part of writing for publication, and that every writer goes through this. And some writers choose to write for a hobby, and that's fine. But if your dream is to publish a book and publish it on Amazon and send it to book reviewers and have readers connect with you, then this is the process you have to go through. So I think
and do you think a lot of that sort of heavy lifting work can be done up front in the planning of the book?
Yeah, I think if they know if they outline the book and they kind of know if they know going in what the most common problems are structurally with the book, then they can kind of think their book through before they write it, or if they're in the middle of it, and they learn all this, then they can kind of stop and get themselves back on track. But once you finish, it can be it just feel like this overwhelming task if you have 300 pages and you know that you have to rewrite every page. I mean, and it's not impossible. I've done huge rewrites myself. I think most writers have done overwhelming rewrites. You just have to kind of gear yourself up for it and take it one step at a time, like one editing pass.
I suppose if you look at it in a simple sense, it's not a lot different from, say, composing an email, a reasonably long email, and then coming back after lunch and thinking, actually, that's not what I meant at all. How's that going to be looked at by the reader?
I equated a lot to like putting together a puzzle where there's different puzzle pieces, and you're going to work on this one piece right now, and then you're going to work on the next piece. So if you just break it into steps rather than try to tackle it all at once.
One of my friends has been reading a book called Saving the Cat because he wants to write a novel. I don't know whether you're familiar with that book.
No.
It's a book about almost a formula for writing novels. And we had a discussion about it, and he was saying that you have to start off with the protagonist. The character has to have some sort of transformation on the way and all the rest of it. My initial impression was that that seems quite formulaic and could be a danger to some of the creativity. And yet he was explaining that, a lot of books, the classics, the Thomas Hardy classics, the Jane Eyres and all the rest of it, they've all got a similar sort of formula going through. What would you say about that?
Actually, I was having a discussion about this very topic on my Instagram feed the other day, because I had posted something like, what's your least favorite bit of writing advice? And that was one of the things that one of my followers had posted was, that there's so many like formulas and templates, and she prefers a more intuitive approach. So I think it's really like a blend. I think it is important to have, to start with a formula. Like I like to use a 3-act structure where there's like the first quarter is the character, learning what their arc is and what their main obstacle is going to be. And then the middle is the second act where you're really building up to all the obstacles and conflict, both inner and outer. And then the third act is the climax and the resolution. So I think that's a great formula to start with. And then depending on your genre, there's also certain reader expectations, like for romance novels. There's different subcategories of romance, but readers of those subcategories have different expectations. So, you want to give the readers what they're expecting and what they expect from this genre, what they expect from reading a novel, but you also want to put your own creativity and intuition into it and make it your own. So I think that's just, if you start with some kind of formula, that will help keep you on track and make sure that you're meeting all these requirements. But from there, the rest is totally
use it as a foundation and a sort of structure rather than going right through it and just writing to the formula.
Right. And I like keeping it simple. I mean, I know there's some books that really could break it down and, this has to happen on this page and this happens on this page. I've never really wanted to go that into the formula. I just like having just this basic general formula to follow, and then just really leave it up to your creativity. It reminds me of like when my daughter was in 4th grade. She had like her teachers were really teaching like for the tests, the state tests that all the kids had to take. And I just will never forget this assignment she gave, which was like they had to write these sentences, and the sentences had to have like a certain number of verbs in it and a certain number of adjectives. And, and it was just, she looked at it and she was in tears because she was like, I can't even think like this. And I remember sending a note to the teacher saying, that's really stifling their creativity. And, why not just have them look out the window at the snow and write a paragraph describing that. So I think, you don't want it to be like so tied to the formula.
No.
You do. No. It's just a balance, I would say.
Yeah. And the book editing blueprint program that you started this year, I guess, does that sort of give everybody who takes it on all that type of information?
Yeah. So they could use it if they have a completed draft and they're ready to start doing rewrites. They could use it at that point. If they haven't started writing or they're very early in the process, it gives them this different worksheets they can fill out that can help. Like if somebody who had already had the completed manuscript, when they filled out the workbook, it would be like to evaluate what they've already written. But if you haven't written your book yet, or if you're in, just in the early stages, you can actually use that to help outline your book and to help.
Oh, that sounds really good. I'll put that in the show notes, so any listeners that are interested can see it.
And I also give them at the end, there's like a 25-page blueprint of everything that a developmental editor would be looking for if you submitted a manuscript. So that way they can go through this checklist, and it breaks it down into each category, like character, setting and description. Goes a bit into line editing and copy editing issues also. Like there's a lot of, like for line editing, a lot of authors tend to overuse certain words or write passively. There's a lot of common copy editing mistakes that writers make. So, it introduces them to the most common mistakes. I mean, if many writers will need a copy editor after they've worked with the developmental editors, because they might have trouble with grammar and punctuation. So it's not going to replace the need to hire a copy editor, but it will help them we'll give them some tips for how they can cut down on the most common mistakes, because if they can clean it up a bit, that could still bring down their copy editing expenses if they're sending in
and you also offer an editing service for people as well.
Yeah, so I do a blend of developmental editing and line editing, depending on what stage the manuscript is in. Like if it's a advanced writer who just needs a little bit of fleshing out here and there, or just some feedback on scenes, I can do a lot of line editing just to help pump up their word choice and make sentences more active. If it's a beginner writer, we often just focus more on the big developmental things, the big things like the characters and the point of view and the writing technique, the plot. And the line editing is more along the lines of giving them examples, like, because it wouldn't make sense to line edit a whole manuscript that has to be rewritten anyway, but I'll do some line editing to give examples of, like, this is how you can, use more vivid words, or this is an example of a sentence that's passive and we can make it more active, or this is how we can get, deeper into the character's point of view.
So I guess when you're editing something like that, you have to get deeply absorbed in the story yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And you might think, well, actually, I could take this on and finish it.
I like to brainstorm a lot. So, I think because I'm a writer, I'll often, in my editorial letters, I'll come up with ideas, and they're free to use them or just use it as a springboard for their own ideas. But, I'll kind of play with, I like, it's fun. It's like to play in their world, in their story world. So I get to kind of use some of my creativity. Like, well, I wonder what would happen if you did this, or maybe the characters, maybe this could be part of her inner journey.
Yeah. And going back to your stories, where do you get the inspiration for them?
It varies depending on the book. Like my Storybook Valley series had a theme park. I've always loved theme parks. My husband and I actually got engaged at Epcot when we were on a trip to Disney World. Yeah.
Lovely.
And then we went to Disneyland Paris on our honeymoon, and we've gone to Disneyland in California. So we just love theme parks. And we were taking our kids to a small fairy tale theme park in New Hampshire. And we had just gone to visit Cinderella. And after we left the castle, it's like this idea just flooded over me of what if there was a reluctant theme park Cinderella who didn't want to be a Cinderella, but she had to for some reason. And what if her boss was like her Prince Charming, and that inspired fooling around with Cinderella. My mystery novel 25 years ago today is about a newspaper editorial assistant who stumbles across a 25-year-old unsolved murder while she's compiling the 25 and 50 years ago today column on the microfilm. And that was a job that I had when I started at the newspaper as an editorial assistant. So that was inspired by my days working for a small independently owned newspaper. Yeah. And then like my hockey rivals books was inspired by my love of ice hockey. When I was in high school, I really loved ice hockey. And
did you play it?
I didn't know, but I just got really into it during the Olympics. Yeah. And then we had the Boston Bruins, and they did really well that year. And then because I love to read, I was trying to find fiction to read about it, and I couldn't find anything. So then I just wrote my own. So it was sort of like a entertainment for myself and also to fill a gap.
And when you're sort of gestating the ideas for your stories, do you talk it through with other people, like your husband or friends or anything, or is it all by yourself?
No, I always talk it through. I talk it through with my husband a lot. I have a best friend from high school who actually, when I was writing my book Face Off in study hall, she would, I'd send her pages and she would read it and give me feedback. So to this day, I'll still run things by her. I've had various critique partners or writing friends over the years where I'll bounce things off of them or say, hey, if you want to read this chapter, just let me know what you think. But I talk a lot with my husband also.
Yeah. In your experience, do you think many authors work like that?
I think so. I mean, I think some tend to, in the beginning, especially if it's like their first book, sometimes they don't want anybody to discourage them or they're afraid to tell somebody about it because in case they get negative feedback. But I think it's important to bounce ideas off people. It's great to belong to writing groups. There's a lot of online writing groups where you can make connections and have critique partners. But always remember that it's your story, and there's a balance of kind of knowing what feedback to accept and that works well and that resonates with you, and also somebody just might not connect with your idea, and that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It could just mean that they're not your target audience. So I think be careful with it, but definitely be open to feedback.
And do you have any books on the go at the moment that you're writing?
I've been focusing lately on my classes. I would like to do a Storybook Valley Christmas novella, and I'm thinking about doing a third book on my Hockey Rivals series. But I've been I have something for writers that I hope to release this fall. It's like a nonverbal communication toolkit. It'd be like a PDF available on my website, where it's sort of like an interactive reference and also like a system for them to follow, because a lot of writers have a tendency, especially beginning writers, they have trouble like portraying characters' emotions. Like there's a lot of looks and smiles and frowns and just a lot of cliched phrases to depict emotions. So I have like the different prompts that they can use for different emotions. And then I also kind of explain how you can use this just as a springboard to, to come up with even.
And is that available on your website now?
It's not right now, but it should be available in November.
Well, like I say, I'll put the links of your websites and all your other social media stuff on the show notes.
Shortcuts for Writers website.
Yeah. And when you do write, actually, when you write a book, what does the day look like? How long are you writing for? How do you set yourself about on it?
I do like my best writing in the morning, I think. So I would tend to write for a couple hours before lunch, then maybe take a break, come back and maybe finish up whatever I was working on for like another hour or so. And then I seem to kind of run out of steam around 3 o'clock. And then I focus on book promotion or, a task like that isn't as creative.
And how long does it take to write a book?
That's varied over the years. When I was younger, like before I had kids, it would take me maybe 6 months to a year to write a draft. Since I had kids, it's my time is sort of more scattered. So my book Fooling Around with Cinderella took me, it was put on hold temporarily for about a year because my daughter was diagnosed with diabetes during that time.
Oh dear.
When she was 6 years old. So I had to put it aside for a while. So
of course.
But with the actual writing part of it, probably about 2 years. I did Offsides, my sequel. It less than a year because I was really focusing on that every day. Basically, I wanted to get it done. I wanted it released by Christmas, so I focused on that and was able to get that done in less than a year.
Yeah. And so what would you tell someone who is interested in becoming an author, but they've got a daytime job or they're looking after a family or both? What would you tell that person if they really wanted to write something?
I would say to break it down into steps, like come up with an outline for your book, and then just break it into steps, like, look at your calendar and find where you can make some time. Like, when I'm really deep into writing a book, even, when my kids were younger, I mean, sometimes I would come up, like my husband and I like watch a lot of TV together at night. Sometimes I'd come up an hour later than I typically would, so that I could just have an hour on the computer to work.
Yes.
Sometimes I would get up like an hour earlier to do that. But then there's other times where I'm just like, if we've been busy, I'm like exhausted and there's no way I can fit in another hour because I'd just be too tired to really, have anything, anything really well written come out of me. So in those cases, even if you can just do 10 minutes, if you're going through a busy time, like the holidays, if you're really busy, just 10 minutes a day or every other day, that will get you toward your goal. But sometimes,
so just keep it as a habit and do it for even if it's 10 minutes, just do it.
I think it's important to make it as a habit and give you some time on your computer, on your calendar, and just look for places where you can find. I mean, you could probably find 10 minutes if you spend 10 less minutes scrolling on social media, scrolling through Facebook.
We could all do that.
Yeah.
And how important is research for writers for both fiction and nonfiction?
Extremely important. And I think because of my journalism background, I've always been really interested in research. I actually wrote an article for the magazine The Writer about research, where I interviewed several authors about their, how they research their different books. And it can be like a big research where you like go out to interview someone or to experience something firsthand. Like I've taken audited a firearms class because I was reaching getting handguns, for a character who was being stalked, and I got to go on the firing range, or an outdoor firing range, and that was just, it really gave me a lot of authentic details that I never would have been able to get from reading about it. But sometimes it's just a small research, like just a detail, like when I was writing Fooling Around with Cinderella, I obviously been to a lot of theme parks, but there's only so many in my area that I could go to. So I wanted to kind of create my own theme park. So I did a lot of research, going on websites of different theme parks all over the world, and just getting an idea of different rides and different things that they offered, and just little bits and pieces of that wound up in my book, just to kind of make my fictional fairy tale park come alive and feel unique. So there's some research you can just get from online, or I've also run things by people who have more expertise than I do. Like for my Offsides book, I had like a long interview with someone that works for a organization that works like with high school families whose kids want to play college ice hockey. So I really wanted to understand that process, because if I didn't understand that process, my book Offsides would fall flat. It wouldn't be realistic. So I really needed to understand that process of getting to like the Division I hockey and the NCAA. And we talked a lot about junior hockey. So that was invaluable, just talking to an expert. And I had a friend from high school who was a hockey mom, so I had her read the book, and I sent some questions that her teenage son and his friends answered. So that gave me a lot of authentic details, like they like to play knee hockey in the hallway, and how they would put like a goalie net in front of the garage, and take shots in the driveway. So just lots of little details that are hard to find online. So it's just a mix of different ways you can approach research depending what you need. Yeah.
So what's downtime for you? Obviously, you've got a young family. You're a writer. You've got the editorial stuff going on, and you're visiting theme parks. Do you do anything else?
I like to do yoga. I love to read. I'm interested in kind of inspirational self-help books and chick lit and mystery. So I love to do a lot of reading, taking walks, and then I'm addicted to the TV show Supernatural. I love that.
Oh yeah,
Netflix. And my husband and I have been watching The 100. We have like one more episode left to go. So we usually we'll find a series that we binge watch, and then we get really into it.
Yeah. No, I think with the lockdowns we've had, it's been a lot of people have been sort of addicted to various series on Netflix.
Yes. We really didn't get out too much this year. We usually like to do some traveling, and yeah, we just really haven't done much this year.
No, I've just, I say I've just started. I've just seen 50. I'm one of these people who didn't ever do it, but I've just seen 51 episodes of Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, how was it? I haven't tried that one.
Have you not? No, it's good. Yeah, and of all the things that you've done, Stacey, what are you most proud of?
I think today I'm just most proud of my children. They're definitely my my biggest masterpiece. And I think for projects, I am proud of fooling around with Cinderella because, as I was saying, my daughter was 6 years old and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was in the middle of writing it. And it was a really dark time for us because it was such a huge life change. And I put the book aside for almost a year because I couldn't focus on it because I had so much to learn about diabetes management and to get her the right technology and the right doctors. So being able to go back and finish that and to get myself back into that lighthearted mindset to write that kind of humorous fairy tale novel, that was a triumph for me. We kind of overcome this obstacle, or enough to have to go back to some normalcy. Yeah.
And before we wrap up, are there any other projects? You mentioned about your new project for writers, but have you got anything else coming up that you'd like to share with listeners?
I'm probably going to be releasing a light version of my book editing blueprint course. Hopefully by the end of the year. Yeah. The light version would just focus on the copy editing and line editing section, like for nonfiction writers or for writers who are more experienced and they don't feel that they need the whole thing with the characters and the plot and everything. So that and the non-verbal toolkit are the two projects that I hope to release by the end of the year.
Oh, that's great stuff. Well, it's been a really fascinating conversation, Stacey. Thank you ever so much for coming on. We'll put all your details on the show notes. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you. You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.